I stared at my phone, the little notification glowing like it was mocking me. Another baby shower invitation, this time for my cousin Madison. Everyone was invited, everyone except me. I let out a quiet laugh, tasting the bitter irony. Me, the childless one. The girl who'd somehow been written out of every milestone because she didn't fit their narrow checklist. I sank into the soft leather of my apartment chair, running my fingers over the silk of my blouse. The sunlight spilled across the floor, reflecting in the glass vase of white orchids I'd splurged on that morning. My life looked perfect, on the surface, at least. My loft, my promotion, my travel schedule, they were all visible trophies. But the truth? Some victories are quieter, hidden from judgmental eyes. I tapped the message again, hesitating. Would you like to join us for Madison shower? Of course, I hadn't received it. My mom had sent it to everyone else. I let the screen fade to black. My chest tightened, not just from exclusion, but from remembering the whispers I'd overheard at the last family gathering. A soft ding pulled me out of my thoughts. Another message. This one wasn't from family. It was from someone I hadn't expected, someone who might change everything. I tilted my head, my heart speeding, sensing that 2 weeks from now, nothing would be the same. 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was 2 years. Time blurred when the hurt lingered. I remembered standing in Madison's nursery, the pastel walls and tiny booties mocking me. I had tried to smile as Aunt Carol fussed over the decorations, cooing at the plush toys, while cousins I barely knew flitted around like butterflies. Everyone was talking about their pregnancies, their plans, the future of their children. And me? I felt invisible. Claire, my mom whispered almost apologetically, you don't need to come. It's just family with kids. Her eyes flicked nervously toward Madison, as if I were a shadow threatening the joy in the room. I forced a smile, my hands shaking, pretending I was fine. But inside, there was a lump in my throat, a cold ache that would not leave. I stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, pressing my palms to my eyes. The world had made me feel smaller, irrelevant, as if my accomplishments didn't matter because they weren't attached to a stroller or a nursery rhyme. I thought about my grandmother, who had always believed in me when no one else did. Don't let anyone decide your worth, Claire, she had told me once, pressing a small gold locket into my hand. You'll make your own path. Keep your heart open, but protect your dreams. I touched the locket now, feeling the smooth, reassuring weight against my fingers. In that moment, I made a decision. I would stop shrinking for others' comfort. I would stop apologizing for living a life that didn't match their expectations. I would forge my own success, quiet and unseen if I had to, until the day they could no longer ignore it. I left the nursery behind, holding onto the locket and the resolve it represented. My chest was still tight, my hands trembling, but there was a spark of defiance now, bright and unstoppable. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I wasn't going to be dismissed again, not for being childless, not for anything. After that day in the nursery, I threw myself into my work with a new intensity. I had always been ambitious, but now it wasn't just about climbing a career ladder. It was about proving to myself that my worth wasn't defined by anyone else's checklist. I found a mentor, a sharp, seasoned woman named Vanessa, who ran her own boutique marketing agency. She looked at me during our first meeting and said, "You have fire, Claire. Don't waste it bending to other people's expectations." Her words felt like a lifeline. The next months were grueling. I worked long nights, often in my tiny apartment, coffee cups piling up beside my laptop. I studied trends, polished proposals, and swallowed my doubts like bitter medicine. There were days when I questioned whether I could do it alone, when rejection emails felt like personal punches. But every small victory, landing a first client, getting my first big account signed, seeing my savings grow, was a tiny anthem of proof that I could survive, thrive, and flourish. I learned to balance ambition with discretion. Family calls were brief, polite, and vague. Social media only showed curated smiles, a life they assumed was ordinary, never hinting at the empire I was quietly building. There was a strange thrill in keeping my success hidden from those who once doubted me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about self-respect, about controlling the narrative of my own life. Through Vanessa's guidance, I expanded into consulting, helping small brands find their voice. I traveled for work, stayed in hotels that overlooked city skylines I had once only dreamed of, and signed contracts that made me feel like I was finally standing on my own 2 feet. Each achievement was a quiet rebellion against the world that had dismissed me for being childless or unconventional. I kept the locket my grandmother had given me close at all times. It was a reminder that my path was mine to choose, that my value wasn't contingent on anyone else's approval. Some nights, I'd sit on the balcony of my apartment, city lights sprawling beneath me, and smile at the irony. They thought they could exclude me, ignore me, make me feel invisible, but they had no idea the life I was building in silence. By the time I heard about Madison's baby shower again, I was no longer the girl who felt diminished in hallways and whispering rooms. I was Claire Parker, independent, accomplished, quietly formidable. And yet, I kept the world at bay, waiting for the perfect moment to step into the light. The thought of that moment made my pulse quicken. Soon, very soon, I would no longer be invisible. 2 weeks after that fleeting message, I arrived at Madison's apartment. Not for the shower, of course. That had long passed, a celebration I was never invited to. No, I arrived because I had a meeting that would change everything. I told them I had a work consultation in the city, vague enough to avoid suspicion. The door opened, and there they were, my parents, Aunt Carol, Madison, and a scattering of relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. They paused, surprise flickering across their faces when they saw me. Claire Parker, no longer the quiet, excluded cousin, no longer the childless one. I had grown into my power quietly, but today, I would let them see it. "Claire," my mom exclaimed, eyes wide, hands fluttering like they were trying to hold onto the old version of me. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, letting the tension hang in the air.
"Hello," I said.
The words were calm, controlled, yet heavy with unspoken history. I stepped inside, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood, and let them take in the office space I had set up in her apartment, a small but elegant showcase of my accomplishments. Art adorned the walls, abstract pieces I had commissioned myself. A sleek laptop sat on the glass desk, alongside a leather portfolio with embossed initials. Books on marketing, business, and self-improvement lined the shelves. Everything in the room spoke of taste, independence, and effort. They stared, and I could almost hear the mental shift, the realization that I had become someone they hadn't expected. "I see you've been busy," Madison said, forcing a casual tone that didn't quite reach her eyes. I laughed softly, walking to the center of the room. Busy? Yes. Thriving? Even more so. I opened my portfolio and spread out documents, contracts, client lists, even a small but clear statement of my earnings. Their faces shifted from polite smiles to wide-eyed disbelief. You've built this?" my mom whispered, shaking her head. "Yes," I said simply. "And I did it on my own, without needing approval or validation from anyone here. Every client, every project, every success, it's mine. And for the record, being childless didn't stop me from living a full, meaningful life." Madison's cheeks flushed, guilt and embarrassment mingling as she looked down. Aunt Carol's jaw tightened. She had expected a timid apology, a smaller version of me, not a woman who had quietly outgrown the limitations they had tried to impose. I let them linger in the moment, taking it all in. The shock, the shame, the awe, it was intoxicating in a way I hadn't realized I'd crave. Then I smiled, softer this time, and said, "I hope this shows you something important. Never underestimate someone's potential, and never define them by what they haven't done, but by what they can achieve." It was a quiet victory, but one that spoke volumes. They could not ignore me now, not my accomplishments, not my presence, not the woman I had become. I could see it in their eyes, the realization that I was no longer the girl they could dismiss, the cousin they could ignore. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of my own power, tempered with patience and purpose. This wasn't about revenge. This was about setting boundaries, creating respect, and giving them a chance to change. I leaned against the edge of the desk, letting my gaze sweep over the room. "I'm willing to help you, to be part of your lives," I said, letting the words hang in the air like a promise and a challenge all at once. "But there are conditions. Things need to change. Not because I demand it, but because I've learned that growth requires courage." My mom's eyes widened, bracing herself, and Madison's hands twisted nervously. I took a breath and started. "First, no more judgments based on assumptions about me, about anyone else. You can't dismiss someone's worth because they don't follow your expectations.
Second, honesty.
I won't tolerate manipulations or gossip. Speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Third, support each other's dreams. Madison, your baby is important, but so is every other choice people make around you. Respect it." I paused, letting each condition sink in. And finally, compassion. Growth isn't about forcing others to change overnight. It's about small steps, reflection, and accountability. I'll be here to guide, but only if these rules are honored. The room was silent. I could see them processing, each family member caught between pride, shame, and a dawning understanding that they had underestimated me. This was the moment they realized respect wasn't given freely. It had to be earned. And I had earned mine, not just through success, but through the resilience and integrity that had carried me here. "Claire," my mom began, voice trembling. But I cut her gently, holding up a hand. "I care about all of you. That's why I'm doing this. But I won't compromise who I am. If you want me in your lives, these are the steps." I watched as they nodded, slowly, awkwardly at first, but with sincerity beginning to shine through. I knew it would take time, that old habits die hard. But this was a start, a foundation built on respect, self-worth, and a new understanding of what it meant to see each other as equals. For the first time in years, I felt a calm sense of victory. The power had shifted, but not cruelly. It was a soft, firm power, the kind that demanded change and inspired growth. And for the first time, I knew my family might finally see me, not as childless Claire, but as Claire Parker, a woman who chose her path, built her life, and refused to shrink for anyone. Weeks passed, and the changes were subtle but undeniable. My mom started calling more often, not just to ask about me, but to genuinely listen. Madison began inviting me to small gatherings, careful to include me, not out of obligation but with sincerity. Aunt Carol even sent a message one evening. "Thank you for showing me what it means to stand firm. I'm learning." I watched all of it from my apartment balcony, the city lights spilling across the skyline, and felt a rare sense of peace. The locket my grandmother had given me glinted in the soft lamplight on my desk. I touched it, a tangible reminder of where I had started, the pain I had endured, and the woman I had become. Every triumph, every long night of work, every quiet victory had led me here, not just to success, but to self-respect and authentic connections. It wasn't perfect. There were lingering moments of awkwardness, residual doubt in their eyes. But the foundation was laid. Change doesn't happen overnight, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. What mattered was that I had shifted the narrative, not through anger, but through perseverance and clarity of purpose. One evening, Madison called, voice gentle. "Claire, would you like to join me for a small family dinner? Just us, celebrating the baby?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air. For a fleeting moment, I remembered the hallways, the whispers, the sting of exclusion. Then I smiled, a calm, confident smile. "I'd love to," I said. I didn't feel like a visitor in their lives anymore. I felt like an equal, respected, acknowledged, and fully myself. And as I hung up and looked out at the city, I whispered to the locket, to my grandmother, to myself. I didn't need anyone's approval to become who I was meant to be. And now, I choose to be seen, not because I have to, but because I can. In that moment, I understood the full weight of independence. It wasn't about excluding or punishing anyone. It was about claiming my worth, my dreams, and my joy. I had lived through rejection, emerged stronger, and in doing so, created a space where love, respect, and growth could flourish. And finally, I knew, childless or not, overlooked or underestimated, my life was mine, and I would never shrink again.